Lisa. As Lisa said, I'm Alice McKenney, and I am the Chief of the Community Meals Policy Branch at the FNS National Office. And I'm excited to be here today with you all and to moderate today's question and answer session. I'd now like to introduce you to each of our panelists today who are going to be fielding questions from the National Office. And if it would be possible to spotlight all of their videos as well, I'll read off their names if that's helpful. So we've got Andrea Farmer, who's the Branch Chief of the Community Meals Monitoring Branch in the Program Monitoring and Operational Support Division. Angela Klein, who's the Director of the Policy and Program Development Division. Kevin Miskornick, who is the Branch Chief of Operational Support in the Program Monitoring and Operational Support Division. Crystal Tolar, who is the Chief of the Compliance Branch in the Civil Rights Division. And Alicia White, who is the Acting Director of the Nutrition, Education, Training, and Technical Assistance Division. I think we're just perfect. Great. So before we get started, I want to thank all of those who submitted questions in advance for this session. As was mentioned prior to this, we are going to attempt to answer as many of them as we can. We know that some questions were submitted that we might not be able to answer, but do know that we are taking them all under consideration for future guidance documents. If we do not get to a question that you submitted, and it's related to a real life issue you're having in your state, we request that you submit your question via the regular regional office inquiry process. Also, before we begin, I want to add that these responses to these questions have largely not gone through our official clearance process. However, we wanted to be as responsive to you all as possible. And so let's dive in. So I'm going to start first with Andrea. We've got some questions on offsite monitoring, which is very timely considering the session that just finished. So the first question I have here is, would virtual or video site visits be considered after the COVID-19 emergency is over? Can the state agency spread out those reviews since the team is small and applications can be year-round, as well as technical assistance throughout the fiscal year is going to be more pressing?
Yeah, so this again is going to probably be dependent on what your approved oversight plan was. And I will say, you know, spreading out reviews and moving them around, that's within what you can do. Normally that's allowed, but in this case, when you're talking about closures, some of the state oversight plans, besides waiving certain requirements, they included extended review cycles. And so in those cases, that did help to cover this particular instance of having to, you know, move reviews into another year. But if that's not covered under your plan, then it may be that you would also need a waiver if you're not going to be able to meet the monitoring requirements.
The next question is, how do state agencies handle institutions or sponsors that were in reviews in FY20, were issued corrective action, the center closed, and the corrective action is outstanding? These institutions did not submit claims, did not reapply for fiscal 21, and have not reapplied for fiscal 22. Do we issue a notice that their corrective action will remain outstanding until they reapply for Cacfp again?
Okay, so I'm assuming that this does not have to do with serious deficiencies, which I'm going to be covering a little bit later. So this is just a case where a review was conducted, you had a finding, you issued a corrective action, and then it sounds like that institution just closed down. Basically dropped off the program is what it sounds like, and they didn't renew. So in this case, well, first, if you have a procedure, a process that you normally follow when that happens, you would want to follow your normal process. Because this can happen outside of COVID. This similar situation could also happen. But basically the bottom line is you're correct. If they have an outstanding corrective action and they reapply to come on to the program, that has to be considered in their reapplication. That would be something that would have to be corrected. And it would be depending on what the corrective action was. And of course, that's at your discretion about whether it has been done. But it would need to be resolved before they were accepted to be back on the program.
And then one more question for you, Andrea. What is the guidance for institutions who are not declared SD, but aren't able to complete their corrective action because of COVID-19 related closures? The state agency's stance has been to allow them to submit within a specified time frame upon reopening. Can that continue?
So in this instance, we would agree with what the state agency stance is on how to handle that. We don't have any official guidance on this, but that seems like a reasonable approach.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Now we're going to move on to Alicia for a few questions about nutrition and training. So the first question for you is, will you release additional resources for determining grains in ounce equivalents and when?
Thank you. So as we stated earlier today, Team Nutrition has released a wide array of materials for training on ounce equivalents for grains, and this includes 5 training worksheets, 4 webinar recordings, presentation slides with notes, the digital Exhibit A grains tool, which is part of the food buying guide, and more. And we put all of these resources together in one easy to find place on the Team Nutrition website on our grains ounce equivalents resources webpage. There are basic tools that show you how to use household measures to determine grains ounce equivalents. There are also more specific training tools on doing ounce equivalents for your recipes, infant meal pattern, grains ounce equivalents, and more. So the only planned resource that we have still to release is a presentation slide deck with notes on crediting single serving packages of grains in the Cacfp. So I would actually like to ask all of you if there are additional resources that you feel are still needed related to grains ounce equivalents, if you could type those in the chat. And we would be happy to take a look at those and see what we could do for you.
Great, great. So the next question is, why can't USDA get training out sooner? We often have to create our own because USDA's is not timely enough.
NPA, you saved your spicy question for me and Team Nutrition. We have developed a wide number of meal pattern training resources over the last couple of years, a huge amount, in fact, in both English and in Spanish. And we've been working really hard to do so. It can take us time to determine the most effective training method, as well as to make sure that we're getting feedback from you at the state agencies, as well as Cacfp operators, to make sure these resources are practical, relevant, and effective. It is a little difficult to answer this question again without knowing, what specific resource you feel like is lagging or behind. So again, if you want to add that into the chat, we'd be happy to take a look at that, and just know that we are working hard to get things out to you as soon as possible.
Great. And one more question for you, Alicia. Can USDA make a new staff training at the state agency level based on ICN materials? It could be done by either ICN or MH Miles.
Okay. So while the Institute of Child Nutrition does not have specific training for new state agency staff, ICN does offer training on the Cacfp meal pattern requirements in various formats, including in-person training, virtual instructor-led training, and self-paced online courses that can be used to orient new staff on the Cacfp meal pattern requirements. Course materials are also available for download from ICN's website, so you could download those and use those in your own new employee onboarding. Additionally, Team Nutrition does provide a number of meal pattern training resources that you are welcome to use also to help orient your new staff to the meal pattern training. And I think, Andrea, you had some additional information you wanted to add to this question.
I'm sorry, Alicia, I thought that was given to you. I will say it off the top of my head. Okay. So MH Miles, I will say, they still have training opportunities for state agencies that will be available until June 30th, 2022, so for almost another year. And they also are working on expanding their online modules. Those are for state agencies, can take them as well as sponsoring organizations. So I would encourage you to go to these are core trainings. I would encourage you to go to their website, which I will look it up and put it in the chat in my next break.
Great, thank you both. This is convenient, we'll slide right into some more questions for you, Andrea. You guys submitted a lot of monitoring related questions, so here we are. Happy to answer them. Here's a few questions around serious deficiency. So will the Sfsp serious deficiency process align with Cacfp anytime soon?
So I'm guessing that question was asked by somebody who is aware of our proposed child nutrition integrity rule that was published about 5 years ago, or also familiar with an RFI, sorry, we did request for information a few years ago about the serious deficiency process. A final rule has not yet been published on the integrity rule, and work is being done on the serious deficiency process. So that is all in progress, but we really cannot give you a time now where any of that is going to be finished. It probably won't go yet, Angela. Yeah.
Well, the integrity rule, I know I got a Darth Vader thing going on. The integrity rule, I just said yesterday that the integrity rule is slated for the spring of 2022. But, with regulations, we're not always the master of our domain. There's a lot of moving pieces, OMB, and you have, sometimes other players involved. It's the Federal Register and other priorities. But right now it is still slated to go out in the spring. And so that is our hope for that one. And, we do believe in that rule. We want to get that done. So but I understand. And I noticed when you say salty one, I see the finally in that one. But you too, the rule writer on this one feels the finally as well. So we would also like to get some of this stuff complete. So we feel your pain.
Great, thank you both. So the next question is, what is the guidance for institutions who are declared SD but aren't able to complete their corrective action within the 90 days because of COVID-19 related closures?
Okay, that's a good question. And we have not released any guidance on this issue, but I will go through and give you some ideas. If the institution submitted a corrective action and the state agency approved it within 90 days, so if that happened before they closed, the regulations allow for a longer time for the institution to implement the corrective action. However, if that institution temporarily closed due to COVID before they submitted a corrective action, we would recommend that the state agency in this case can use its own discretion to sort of stop the clock for the corrective action time frame. But when the institution reopens, then the state agency would have to assign a time frame based on the serious deficiency, a time frame for the institution to submit and complete the corrective action. And really, this is going to depend on the situation. The time frame can vary depending on what the serious deficiency was, what the corrective action was, what needed to be completed, where they were in that process. But in this case, because the institution is closed, it can't be, doing the corrective action. And so having to wait for them to reopen would not go against the current regulations.
Great. And then one more question for you, Andrea, on serious deficiency. If the licensing team has been notified of health and safety issues and are working to have those resolved, why must Cacfp issue notices that give shorter timeframes than licensing does? And those notices carry weight of SD and disqualification when a license hasn't been revoked and the center is taking/has taken proper steps of remediation according to licensing.
All right, so I'm going to refer to regulations here. So according to regulations at 7 CFR 226.6 C5, if state or local health or licensing officials have cited an institution for serious health or safety violations, a lot of times we talk about that as like an imminent threat, the state agency that administers Cacfp must immediately suspend the institution's program participation, initiate action to terminate the institution's agreement, and initiate action to disqualify the institution and the responsible principals and responsible individuals prior to any formal action to revoke the institution's licensure or approval. So that's in the regulations, and then that is what people have to follow. And so at that point, it's really the two things are separate. What we do under Cacfp is, according to the Cacfp regulations, it's no longer tied to what's happening under licensure. So in that case, a state agency must combine a notice of serious deficiency with a notice of proposed termination and proposed disqualification, follow all the regulatory requirements and timeframes for the suspension process.
Great, thanks. So now we'll move back to Kevin. We've got a few questions on funding as well as data collection. So the first question is, since USDA is allowing flexibilities waivers, will there be administrative money that state agencies can request from USDA to change their systems to process the data needed? A lot of state agencies have systems that they bought, such as applications, and those aren't built for the flexibilities. So things have to happen outside of the system.
We definitely appreciate that we have kind of torn the guts out of these programs over the last year and change, and that reporting and data management and what your state systems look like have had to similarly change kind of on an untraditionally rapid timescale. We appreciate that is an outstanding and ongoing need. This is somewhat similar to the previous question that was asked about the extra admin dollars for monitoring costs, and that there isn't a dedicated separate SAE or SAE-like funding stream. However, those are definitely allowable and timely uses of your admin dollars. We might expect to see reallocation requests to cover COVID-related or flexibilities-related systems improvements. That said, I do think this is a perfect opportunity to highlight again that there is a grant-based funding source that can be used for systems improvements like the ones described that all of you have access to right now. And those are the non-competitive technology innovation grants, which I think Andrea already presented on those earlier this afternoon. So hopefully that's not all new. Maybe after I'm done with my questions, I can put a link in the chat for the grant opportunity notice. But I will readily confirm that those non-competitive grants, there's funding that is allocated to your state agency. That's a non-competitive grant. You don't need to compete for it. You do need to apply for it. But I can confirm that technology projects related to flexibilities changes, COVID-19, et cetera, those are all allowable uses for these grant funds. And so please don't forget to consider the NTIGs as a funding source, just as you sort of weigh your resources for technologies and technology needs in the year ahead and I guess beyond. One last thing I'll note about those, because it's a non-competitive grant opportunity, we have been able to substantially streamline the application. And so if you're more familiar with our competitive grants, this is significantly less paperwork burden. We specifically designed it that way to make the funds more accessible because we can't encourage you enough to accept the dollars. The idea behind making TIGs a non-competitive source was to have a cross-cutting regular funding stream that would just be available to states to cover their rolling needs. And so they seem to be particularly well timed, I think, for the unique challenges that many of you are facing right now in the technology and systems space. Final reminder, the applications for those are due July 30th. And so if you have not already taken a look at that opportunity or considered it or begun working on a package, we'd encourage you to do so soonest.
Great, thanks. I have one additional question for you, Kevin. Are you able to provide some of the items you'll be including for Cacfp in the FNS 44 this fiscal year? We'd like to add these data collection methods now with our renewal process to alleviate some of the work on the back end when numbers are due.
Okay. I hope I'm answering this question properly. I think I am, but in case I'm totally off base, the person who asked this can follow up with me, please do. And so as I think most of you or all of you would recall, we did request some additional reporting in the remarks fields of the monthly FNS 44 report. And that was largely focused on breaking out the number of homes and centers that were continuing to offer childcare services throughout the public health emergency, as opposed to those that had limited their operations to only serving meals. I think we also asked for breakouts on those operating under the area eligibility waivers as well. That requirement was in place, that extra reporting requirement was in place for school year 2021. That was outlined in one of our policy memos. I think it was Cacfp 2 2021. And in line with changes in waiver availability for next year, we are not, at least at present time, we have no plans to renew that data collection. And so the memo only extended through the previous school year. We have not extended that memo. And at least right now, we don't have plans to request additional remarks field reporting for this school year ahead, just because the available waivers have changed, and also sort of the expectations around, at least for now, remote versus in person. It's different this year, and so we aren't expecting to do remarks field reporting for this year. Just one last little qualification. I've learned time and time again that this continues to be a dynamic environment. We're continuously assessing our data needs. Unforeseen circumstances can happen. Those needs could change. But for right now, we are not planning to collect anything extra in the 44 report on the remarks field. We're not continuing that.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Now we're going to move on to Angela for a few more policy-related questions. So the first one is, why do sponsoring organizations of daycare homes receive administrative funds, while sponsoring organizations of unaffiliated centers are paid for administrative costs up to 15% of the claims they process? Can USDA standardize administrative payments for all sponsoring organizations?
All right, hold on. Okay, let me answer this. Sorry. It's like having technical difficulties. Every once in a while, my Ludditeness shows. Reimbursement for daycare homes includes food service payments that are passed on to the daycare home provider, and a separate set of administrative payments that is retained by the sponsoring organization. Food service payments are higher for centers because they do not include a separate set of administrative funding. Payments to sponsoring organizations for their administrative costs come out of their unaffiliated centers reimbursements. Andre, did I get that right? This is not my area of expertise. I'm faking it up here a little bit today. So, but I do know this, any changes would require legislative action. And so for that, with Cacfp, a lot of these things that really do require legislative action. I hope that answers someone's question. And also too, I would ask for a lot of these Cacfp questions that folks have for the operating this year. If people could put their one burning question that they have, we have a lot of Q&As that we have in process that we can't answer today because they're in the final stage of clearance. But if you could put in your chat the one burning question that you have, it's really been helpful when we've done other things. Your burning issues that you have in the chat that really help us prioritize our Q&A. And I know it may feel like to some of you that we're not answering all the questions, or where is my question not answered? We do have this robust clearance process, and I would rather not answer it than answer it wrong. I answer it in a way that later a lawyer said, no, it has to go this way. So just please it helps us prioritize. It helps us realize where we've said something unclear. It helps us so much. So please, please put in and also too, it's great when I see 5 different people say, yeah, I need advice in this, it's okay, we got to prioritize that, or we need guidance on this. It really does help us. It's been invaluable. And it's something I think I want to keep when we go back to live sessions. How do we get this numbers of seeing what people really need guidance on? So I'm interrupting Alice, I interrupt everybody, I'm sorry, but if you could definitely get me your burning issues, it would really be helpful. So sorry, Alice, what's the next question?
Oh, great, yeah. The next question is, will Tier 1 reimbursement be extended to all daycare home providers after the area eligibility waiver expires?
So that's a really good question. And I got asked that on day 1 of that waiver. I know there's a lot of excitement about that waiver, and changing the reimbursement structure for family daycare homes for the long term would require reimbursement. Would require legislative change. So once again, that's a congressional action. Outside of my bailiwick, outside of my swim lane. We were only, just for folks that are interested, playing at home. The reason we were able to do that was because of the Nationwide Waiver Authority and the link to safety under the waiver authority, which we will not have after September 30th. So we would not be able to do that long term.
The next question for you is, can USDA clarify the expectation for approval dates for renewing institutions?
Sure. States are expected to provide approval or disapproval for renewing institutions applying to participate in Cacfp within 30 days of receipt. Regulations require that states must notify renewing institutions applying for participation or approval or disapproval within 30 calendar days of state agencies' receipt of a complete application.
Great. And one additional question for you, Angela. Is a prototype electronic Cacfp or Sfsp meal benefit form available?
Not currently, but as you know, USDA did create an online application for school meals. And the web-based prototype application for free and reduced price meals was developed as a model for state agencies to customize and adapt into state data management systems. In fact, we really would like to hear from states that have adapted this tool to help us make decisions about further development of prototype application system for Cacfp and Sfsp. And is there a strong interest in this? Is this something that people, because it's a lot of investment and it's a lot of time, is this something people really would like to see? And people that have done this in their states for the school meals, has it been successful? In fact, I was asked to make a plug to hear feedback from folks that would like to share their experiences with our Office of Program Integrity. They're our research think tank group. So please, if there's folks that would like to share their experiences, please reach out and let me know, and I will share that information.
Great, thanks, Angela. So now we're gonna go back to Andrea, just I think one last time with some miscellaneous questions. So the first one is, state agencies would like to have their disallowance thresholds match across all child nutrition programs. Can the Sfsp disregard of $100 be raised to $600 so that Cacfp at-risk programs don't experience a discontinuity across those programs when being reviewed? Oh, you're on mute.
The Sfsp disregard is in the Sfsp regulations. So to change this, it would be a regulatory change. And that can only happen through the rulemaking process where there is notice and comment.
Perfect, great. And then I have one other kind of combination question for you. So this question is regarding if there are going to be any updates to the current financial viability, administrative capability, program accountability, or VCA requirements. So some of the questions regarding that are, would the USDA consider broadening the scope of the viability portion of VCA to more than just a financial review? There's also questions we got about, will there be any changes for how to assess VCA in independent and single site centers? And then additional questions about state agencies need measurable financial viability indicators for new sponsors. We can't tell the future, particularly for a sponsor of at-risk centers receiving the highest reimbursement. Are you able to talk a little bit about all of those?
Well, so this is kind of simple again. It's sort of related to what I was just talking about, because the VCA procedures, they are spelled out in the regulations, in the Cacfp regulations. So to really make any changes or updates, again, that would be a regulatory process. But what I would say is we do appreciate getting this feedback, because these are things that we would want to know moving forward if we did want to look at making changes. So the things that you bring up about broadening the scope or changes to assessing independent centers, measurable indicators, those are things that we can take into consideration for the future. So thank you for that input.
Great, thanks, Sandra. Now back to Angela for a question. The USDA has now disallowed visual observation for the purpose of race and ethnicity determination. Can the USDA please provide state agencies and program operators with guidance on how to obtain racial and ethnic data without visual identification?
So thank you for that question. And actually, I realize what a big issue this is. We issued that memo, and we know that folks really want more guidance. And we're working frantically on a robust set of Q&As. And Crystal is here in solidarity with me to listen and see the feedback that you guys have. I received quite a few questions on this. And however, because the Q&As are still, and they have to go through a final review with our Civil Rights Division, they need to go through OGC, and they even may have to have further review. I know you guys are gonna, I'm gonna get rattled on this one, but I don't have, I wasn't able to share all the answers today, but they're coming out very soon. And I did want to give a little bit more information about this. As you know, or you may not know, racial equity is a huge priority for the Biden administration. And naturally, all of us want to ensure that meals are provided equitably. And the collection and use of racial and ethnic data can help us achieve that. We understand that collecting data without the use of visual identification is challenging for you all. And in certain situations, like for Cacfp at risk after school and for summer food service program open sites. However, the visual identification really was troublesome and really could be quite painful for some of the folks that was, you know, for some of the people that experienced it. In fact, what we had was a complaint that came through during the Trump administration. We had a complaint that was filed, and actually I think the threatening of action. So this really was a problem. And so we issued the memo that we needed to stop doing that. But the problem is there's still the need for the racial and ethnic data. And so we needed to stop. And I think a lot of you are in agreement that you understand that, that yes, we understand that we no longer can collect the data through doing visual identification, but what next? And so we've heard loud and clear that program operators need ideas on additional ways to collect the data. We need to know that we have been working on the guidance, and we expect to have that available to you in the very near future. We've also been working on design promising practices and collecting best practices to share with you all. Our guidance will include Q&As that we hope can address your top questions about collecting data for individual participants and non-enrolled scenarios, and guidelines on communicating with parents and guardians about data collection, monitoring scenarios, and sources of community data for the population to be served. Please feel free to add your questions. I think I have most of the questions, but feel free to add them again, and comments about racial ethnic data to the chat, and we'll consider them as we develop the assistance. Also, if anyone has best practices, I really need them. So if there's anyone with best practices, I'm all ears, and we can work with the regional offices to gather those. So I just wanted to share that we are we've been working frantically. We've been working with our data people. We've been working with our civil rights. We've been working with our lawyers. And so it's sort of a two-step process here. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for your partnership.
Great, thanks, Angela. I know that's a hot topic right now that folks are.
Yeah, and it's an important one.
Now I want to move on to Crystal for a moment here. We got a question here about a civil rights item. Does the full non-discrimination statement need to be on a state agency's Cacfp website, or is the shortened version okay? Oh, you're on mute, Crystal.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that question. I did go out and look at a few states' websites, and I will say, to answer your question, first of all, yes, the full non-discrimination statement should be on the program homepage or a link to the full non-discrimination statement. And what I saw on some of the web pages was the short statement, then information for the full statement, see another page. However, if you have individuals that go to that page, applicants and so forth, and your homepage is only in English, well, they wouldn't understand to look at another page, especially if it doesn't link to the other page. So it's best to have the full statement in English and at a minimum Spanish, as well as any other frequently encountered languages, especially if your web page does not automatically translate. And again, you should have the full non-discrimination statement on the program homepage or a link to it that says non-discrimination statement. That should be a hyperlink to the full statement. In addition, earlier this year, within the non-discrimination statement, one of the hyperlinks, how to file a complaint, the department recently updated its website. Information should have been sent to all state agencies earlier this year, informing them of the new URL. So I do ask that you check your non-discrimination statements on how to file a complaint to make sure that it does link to the proper page. If you're not sure what that link should be, please reach out to your regional civil rights officer that serves your state.
Great, thanks so much, Crystal. We just have a couple minutes left, so I just have a couple questions for Angela before we close. So the first question I have is, can a child care center that operates CACFP that is closed due to COVID-19 provide non-congregate meals to enrolled children?
Well, while we do not expect this to be as a common issue as we move forward to reopening, we recognize that program operators need flexibility to continue safely serving meals to children under a variety of local circumstances. So under the non-congregate nationwide waiver, CACP institutions and facilities may continue to provide meals through a variety of methods, including pickup schedules with designated times for distribution, as long as these are approved by the state agency prior to implementation. The maximum number of meals that may be offered each child remains the same, as I said earlier, as under regular CACP operations, and the state agency may approve a distribution or pickup approach that includes meals for multiple days, up to 1 week at a time. And upon approving these requests, the state agency should consider the expected duration of the closure, the program operator's capacity to execute such an approach effectively, including his ability to meet state or local food safety requirements. We are hoping this will be the exception as reopening occurs, and we aren't expecting to see a lot of this.
Great. And I just have one final question. Which components under CACFP does the non-congregate waiver apply to? And
I think, for the school year, it can apply, again, when needed, can apply really to any of the CACFP components: child care centers, adult daycare centers, after school care, at risk, family daycare homes, and emergency shelters. I didn't get this question, but I just got to do a little plug. I'm going to make up my own question. I don't know if anybody has this, but can I ask a question can I make up my own question? I would like to have is if anyone is utilizing the new authority that we had under the American Rescue Plan that expanded emergency shelters and at risk to older youth. I was just wondering if that's being used, if there's some excitement about that in your states. We did a webinar a week ago with FRAC, and I was just wondering if folks are using that or had any questions, if there's a need for more guidance on that. I think that's just such a vulnerable population. And there was a question that we received in that webinar that if you only served 18 to 24, would it still apply? And the answer to that is yes, because while you have to do with children, 18 to 24 is allowed under emergency shelters. So I just did want to point that out, that 18 to 24, it could apply. So I asked myself my own question and I answered it. That's a way to perhaps give bad advice, but there you go. So, I did it was such a hot topic in that one meeting. I wanted to let you know that 18 to 24, especially because that is one of the areas that is served a lot by those shelters. So anyway.
Great, thanks, Angela. Before we close, I just want to see if any of my colleagues on the screen have anything they wanted to add in or any additional resources they wanted to share. All right. Well, that concludes today's USDA question and answer session. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did our best to respond to as many of the pre-submitted questions as we could. We know that some questions were submitted that we were not able to answer, but we please do know that we're taking them all under consideration for future guidance documents. If we did not get to a question that you submitted, it is related to a real life issue that you're having in your state, we also request that you submit your question via the regular regional office inquiry process. Thank you all for joining us today. This concludes today's conference sessions, and I'll now turn it back over to Lisa.
All right, thank you so much to Alice and Alicia, Andrea, Angela, Crystal, and Kevin for your answers to all of these questions. It's very much appreciated. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it on to Greta to close us out for today.
Okay, so I would like to thank everyone, or thank USDA, because it was definitely USDA Day. Thank you so much for partnering with CACFP and the CACFP National Professional Association and supporting us in all that we do. I hope that everyone has truly enjoyed today, and you've gotten there's been a lot of information shared, and you were able to take note. Again, the room will stay open just a little bit. If you have any other questions that you would like to type into the chat for USDA, please go ahead and put them in there. We'll leave it open about 5 to 10 minutes after. You can go ahead and type your questions in there, and we will get them to USDA. They like to hear as much information from us as they can. Okay, so we look forward to seeing you on tomorrow. The Zoom room will open at 10:15, and we'll begin with our first session at 10:30. I placed in the chat, as well as I've sent an email with the instructions for the CEU hours and the sheet for that as well. Okay, so hopefully you all received that. Okay, if there are any other questions, this concludes day 2 of our session. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Okay. Will we get a copy of the chat? I guess I'm in front of 100 people still, but it's important to me. Okay, good. Okay. Thank you, I guess. And thanks everybody for everything you do. It's really important. I appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you.